Alright, this next stitching technique for essential crafting I'm going to show you is the whip stitch, and it's kind of my go-to stitch for many projects. It's really easy stitch to get, really easy stitch to do, but you know, some people haven't ever touched a needle and thread before, so that's why I'm doing these little tidbits, because the object of my making these videos is to share, but also to archive. And if people are inspired to work on their own projects, then I also want to empower them to be able to know how to put their pieces together. And many people just don't have the basics, like how to sew or sew a whip stitch. So I'm going to show a basic whip stitch now. So I've got my S needle, which is specially designed for working with leather. I've got a piece of leather, and I've got wax nylon, or what they call artificial sinew, and I've already put a knot in here in the end, so that I don't have to worry about the end slipping out. So essentially I'm going to work, this side is going to be my front and this side is going to be my back. Doesn't really matter though. So I'm just going to pierce towards the edge about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch from the edge here. Okay, so 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch down, or whatever your allowance is. It could be a 1/2 inch, it could be 5/8 or 7/8. Doesn't really matter. But I like to keep my stitches really close to the edge as possible for maximum space material usage. So anyways, once we get this stitched in, all this you're going to do is whip your stitching over like so. So I want to come over to the, I want to bring my needle over to the other side, and about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch next to my previous stitch, I want to go ahead and bring it up again. And sometimes what can be helpful is this piece here, that your tail can be locked into your first step, your first whip, your first stitch, like so, and that'll also secure and help things stay put. I pull that tight, and so that's why I said I didn't really need a knot, because this is one way to lock in your first stitch by whipping over your tail. So anyways, we're going to continue on, and I'm going to whip over to the next side. And again, about 1/4 of an inch away, or to 1/8, and the same amount down. And then I just basically whip over. Like I said, it's a very easy stitch. It's not anything very difficult about it. I think the key is consistency in spacing. That's what can get people frustrated. Is like they will look at their spacing and their stitching and be frustrated that it doesn't look even. A lot of the times, if you're going to do external stitching for a project, meaning the stitching will show, I can understand being anxious about that. But if this is going to be turned inside out and the stitch is hidden, no one really cares. No one's going to really see it. But as a tip, notice where my thread wants to lay, and that's kind of natural for this type of thread. So I kind of use that as a guide as to the next place to put my next stitch. So I use that as a signpost or a guide to know where the next stitch is going to lay in. Okay. And then we're coming to the end here, and again, my stitching isn't perfect, but it works. And you know, sometimes it just adds to the character of your garment. You know, the thing with handmade items is that you know, there's character to them, and that's usually based on the energy, the strength, the spirit of the hand crafter. A lot of store-bought items are pre-pressed and just pressed out and they all look the same, and in many instances that's okay, but in certain instances, you know, it's nice to have that individualism. So it's nice to have those quirks. But I just wanted to show you that this is what the whip stitch looks like against some contrasting material. And like I said, it's not that difficult. The idea is to anywhere from 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch down from the edge, and then anywhere from a quarter of an inch to 1/8 of an inch apart. Now to finish off, what I like to do is I'm going to go through my last hole here one more time like that, and then I usually go about 2 or 3 times actually, and then I go behind my stitches, like that stitch like that. I go behind it, and when I do that, I'm going to find a loop and I pass my needle through the loop at least 2 times, usually 2 or 3 times, and then I just pull it tight, and then I go ahead and stitch like so. And so essentially that's it. I just took a scrap piece of leather and just did a whip stitch. To recap again, you can tuck your starting knot behind your first stitch. That adds for extra security. The key is to try to be as even as you can. This is not a perfect example. And then at the end, all you need to do is just tie off a knot using a double overhand, and you're going to stitch through the loop. So this is a whip stitch.